Your identity in Christ, it means absolutely nothing if you do not have the integrity to remain who you are when no one is looking. Your identity in Christ means absolutely nothing if you do not have the integrity to remain who you are when no one else is looking. Christian leaders and Christians in the pews, we oftentimes fall into the pitfall, into the mistake, into the cycle of doing the right things in public, but then believing we can do whatever we want in private. We go to church, we go and listen to the sermons, we make sure we tithe, we make sure we even listen to, videos and Bible study sessions, and we make sure that on the outside, we're doing everything that's expected of a Christian whose identity is in Jesus. But then when we're out of the public eye, we watch what we want. We gossip about people however we want. We buy what we want. We think that the only thing that matters is what the public sees. But let me be very clear at the beginning of this chapter of Daniel chapter 6. Your identity in Christ means absolutely nothing if you do not have the integrity to remain who you are when no one is looking. Here's the reason why I'm getting a little intense over this. The lack of integrity of Christians is damaging our witness, and it's time to stop. It's time to change. Non-Christians have been saying this to us for years. One of the number one things that Christians are known for is hypocrisy. And I've heard the joke. Whenever people say, you know what, I'm not a Christian because they're a bunch of hypocrites. And the joke of saying, hey, yeah, you're right. We are a bunch of hypocrites. So why don't you come on in? Because there's always room for one more. And there's a part of that joke that's true. At the same time, let's please be honest. Sin is not a welcome guest in this party. Sin is an unwelcome guest. And a lot of the times we justify the sins we do because they're done when no one is looking. Your identity in Christ means nothing if you don't have the integrity to remain who you are when no one is looking. And in Daniel chapter 6, that is the very issue that is confronting us. In Daniel chapter 6, it begins in verse 3 with the king being so excited, King Darius so overwhelmed with Daniel's performance that he wants to promote him, to distinguish him among all of the administrators, to put him up over the whole kingdom. And as you can imagine, this didn't sit too well with the administrators and the satraps. They got a little upset. And one of the things I've learned about envy is that envy usually starts to evolve into scheming, into plotting, to find a weakness, to destroy the one that has something you want. But here's the problem. The problem with Daniel 6 is Daniel doesn't have a flaw in his integrity. Daniel doesn't have corruption to uncover. And they kind of start to hit this roadblock. Verse 4, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel and his conduct of government affairs, anything in the public. But they weren't able to do so. In fact, they could find no corruption in him, not even in private, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Daniel had integrity, but envy does not care or does not cower in the face of integrity. Envy looks for another weakness to exploit. And Daniel's weakness was his love for God, and they knew it. Verse 5, we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. May that be true of me. May that be true of you. May that be true of us so that the world might know him. That our only weakness is not the sin that we do in the dark, in private, but our only weakness is our love and our dedication and our identity firmly rooted in God. What they do is they take the weakness of Daniel, his love for God, and they turn it into a plan. They decide to go to Darius and to trick him into stating a decree, a law that he writes onto the tablet that cannot be overturned, that says this: for the next 30 days, no one in the kingdom is allowed to pray or worship any other god or any other human except for Darius. And if they are caught praying to anyone else, they will be thrown into the den of lions. And I don't know if it was a lapse of judgment. I don't know if Darius didn't totally understand what he was saying or doing, or if Darius just really liked the thought of, that'd be kind of cool to be worshiped for the next 30 days, me alone. But Darius forgot. He forgot about Daniel's commitment, the one that Darius was about to put over the whole empire. He signs in a decree that will actually put Daniel in a precarious situation. King Darius signs the decree, and Daniel is distraught. Daniel is overwhelmed because he's wrestling with, how am I to navigate this new decree that actually puts me into conflict with who I am as a person, a follower of God? And Daniel, what does he do when he's distraught? He prays. And the other administrators knew that's what he would do. They knew that the moment the decree came out, Daniel would turn to his master. Daniel would turn to God. And in verse 11, they are waiting for Daniel to go home and to break the law. They catch him red-handed because Daniel begins to pray. And then we have in verse 13, you see the administrators running to King Darius, tattling on Daniel. It says, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing, for he still prays 3 times a day. And you know what that means then? That Darius is going to have to throw Daniel into the den of lions, the very person he intended to promote all the way back in verse 3. And now Darius is distraught. Darius is overwhelmed, and Darius tries to do anything that he can do to overturn the edict, to make sure that one of his favorite and most trusted administrators is not thrown into the lion's den. But here's the problem. The decree was ironclad. And ironically, even though Darius signed it into law, he did not have the authority to just overturn it because he didn't like it. So instead, Darius gives the order to have Daniel thrown into the den of lions. And in verse 16, this is what he says. He says, Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. Did you catch that? Darius reminds everyone of Daniel's reputation, his weakness, is the God he serves continually. Even whenever Daniel comes out of the lion's den unscathed, the way that he is called out by King Darius in verse 20 also reminds us of Daniel's integrity, Daniel's reputation. King Darius says this, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions? You see, Daniel had a reputation that was far beyond being able to read dreams and to interpret handwriting on the wall. Daniel's reputation was rooted in something deeper than these actions. Daniel's reputation was centered on his identity rooted in God. And we're not just talking about in public. We're also talking about in private. For Daniel was the same person. Whether he was in public or private, his identity never changed. It never wavered. Now here's the reality. Many of us, like the fiery furnace, have been thrown into the lion's den, and we are not promised that following God will keep those lions' mouths shut. But circumstances do not dictate your integrity. Your identity does. For integrity is who you are when no one is looking. And if you are claiming to be a follower of Jesus, then your actions must remain the same, whether you are in public or you are in private. And our witness is dependent upon this. The gospel message is dependent upon the Christians taking this word seriously. And over the last 15 years, over the last 40 years, over the last 100 years, over the last 2,000 years, the number one thing that we struggle with when it comes to PR is the lack of integrity from some of our key Christian leaders. Let me just tell you this. Our number one evangelistic tool, our number one tool to evangelize, to seek and save the lost, is not an apologetic argument. It's not even a group of texts that you can weave together so that people can find their way to their sin and then to their life in Christ. Your number one evangelistic tool is who you are when no one is looking. It's your integrity. So that when people dig deep into your heart, they dig deep into your life, what they find is the same person in private that they found in public. And when that happens, people begin to have the hope that their life can change too, that it can be transformed too, that they too can become truth tellers, that they too can become faithful spouses, that they too can become free from the burdens of sin. Athanasius, one of the early church fathers in around the 4th century, when he was talking about the conversion of people en masse, he has this line that he celebrates. He says, this is what it means to be a Christian. He says, when you come into the church, if you are an adulterer, you leave faithful to your spouse. When you come in a liar, you leave a truth teller. And he says, this is what it means to follow Jesus. The witness in America today thrives and suffers based off of the integrity of those that call themselves Christians. And my prayer and my challenge for you this week from Daniel 6 is that when people look at you, whether in public or in private, all they find is Christ in you.